Dr. Bob Hieronimus, a lowly PhD, hanging out in this part of the universe, and sometimes I know exactly where I am. Lots of times I don't, because there's multi-levels to our universe, and we're not taught that until we get to the age of 21. But I learned that when I was 19. However, I wanted to talk to you about art and the fact that I am an alleged artist. What got me involved in being an alleged artist? It's very simple. I was sitting in my bathtub at the age of 3 or 4. I was reading a comic book, and there was Donald Duck. And I decided I was going to put glasses, I was going to draw glasses on Donald Duck. I drew the glasses on Donald Duck, showed it to my family, and they thought that the glasses already belonged there. So I knew right away I was an artist. That's how you find out, working with Donald Duck and Walt Disney. However, later on, as I found out, most artists don't live the same kind of life that ordinary folks do. What I'm saying basically is this. If you expect to watch TV and have TV tell you your meaning, purpose, and destiny through the news and everything else that's going on, you're going to be disappointed. Sooner or later, you're going to be disappointed. I was disappointed from the very beginning, mainly because I didn't have a TV. When you leave home at the age of 19 and you think you know everything there is to know, and I did. When I was 19 years old, I thought I knew just about everything there was to know, mainly because I was an agnostic, becoming an atheist. I was growing into being a logical positivist. And I realized at that time that the most important thing to all mankind was the mind and rationality. Boy, was I wrong. But I didn't know that then. I thought, I had it all together. However, when you leave home and you're used to your father's and your mom's cooking, big problems result. I'll give you some examples. I think we were living on about $1,500 a year. And at $1,500 a year, every dollar was extremely important. It was so important that I remember the very last dollar bill I had. I was sitting in my bathtub, because in the old days we learned this. Most important thing you can do in the summer when it's 110 degrees in your apartment, your little brick oven in the building, in the city that is to make sure that you sit in cold water for long periods of time. That way you can read, you can enjoy yourself, and still be relatively cool, except when you drop the book into the tub. That happens a lot. But this time I was looking at the only book I wanted to focus on, which was a dollar bill. I saw on the back of the dollar bill this pyramid and the eye in the triangle, and I thought to myself, what's this? Is this America? A pyramid and the eye in a triangle? I don't recall seeing any pyramids in America. Don't know much about these eyes in the triangle, but this looks kind of spooky to me. So immediately I did what everyone should do who's a citizen of the United States. Contacted the State Department. It took them a total of 9 months to finally answer my question, but they couldn't answer my question. What they sent me eventually, after 9 months, was a black and white photograph of the reverse of the Great Seal, and that was it. At that particular time, I realized that I would have to do my own research. Now, being an artist, I wasn't happy about that. I was used to going to encyclopedias. We didn't have an internet then, and certainly we didn't have this kind of stuff pumping over the television or radio airwaves. So I thought the State Department was the key to everything, because it was their symbol. They should know about it. They didn't know about it. So what do? You have to do your own research. I didn't want to do this, mainly because, being an artist, I felt that I had to spend my time in my studio. Now, what are studios? Studios to artists are their temples. It is the place where they spend an enormous amount of time. And we didn't have any radio, we didn't have television, and we certainly didn't have telephone. Only rich people had telephones. So you would spend a great deal of time in the silence, in the quiet, as you work on these little pieces of artwork for 10, 12 hours. I started to notice something as I was working this way. I started to notice that all of a sudden my feelings weren't so much there. I started to notice that I was happier than I ever thought I was. That's around the 4th or 5th hour of work. Somewhere when you get to the 8th or 10th hour, you get literally stoned. And I'm not talking about smoking. I'm not talking about any drug. This is a natural thing to do when an artist is in their studio for long, long periods of time, listening to nothing else. We didn't have birds, so I couldn't listen to them, and we couldn't listen to just about anything else because there was nothing else to listen to except what was inside us. And as you work 10, 12 hours at a time, 7 days a week, month after month, year after year, you change. You change dramatically. You become, you become much more empathetic to people who have nothing, to people who do not have the joy that you have in your little temple. Because in your little temple, you're free to do pretty much what you want without any money, because you ain't got any money, right? So you got to make all of your joy inside of you. And that happens naturally over a long period of time. One of the reasons why I want to emphasize this is that I bumped into so many people who wanted to become artists, and I kept trying to tell them, well, you know, you're not going to have the same lifestyle. Do you think you're going to have a car? Of course, my mom's car, my dad's car. No, you're not going to have a car. You can't afford the insurance. How are you going to get a car? You couldn't even pay for the car. How are you going to pay for the insurance? Oh. Then, if you have a car, then you got to pay for the gas. Well, you're going to choose between money for food, or you're going to choose between taking your car out for a ride. Well, needless to say, when you're hungry, and back in those days, we had basically one meal a day. And it was just like Henry Miller taught me how to eat, which was everything was a banquet. Everything took a long time. We would take the longest time to eat a fried bologna sandwich, because that's basically what I had to live on for a while there. Because with $1, you buy a loaf of bread and a pound of bologna, and we drank the water from our spigots. We didn't know any better then. We thought it was the only water, who went out and bought water in those days, right? So that process of focusing on what really is important is the inside, your internal being. That doesn't sell well when you're trying to talk to other artists who say, I'd like to be an artist because I'd like to become famous. Fat chance. If that's your reason, as TV would tell you today, they'll become famous in a half hour or whatever it is, then you're in real trouble. Mainly because you've got to feed yourself, and if you've got to feed yourself, there's got to be some kind of way by which you can bring in an income without depending on mom, dad, and everybody else in the universe, right? Because some of us do have a lot of pride, and we want to make sure that what we have is ours, that we earned it in a certain way. It's kind of a growth, that kind of thing. I don't know why all artists think they're going to be rich when they grow up, but a lot of them do. We used to have a phrase in the old days, and the phrase was R&R. Let's go on R&R. To most other people, it was more or less like what? Rock and roll. Let's go rock and roll, or rest and relaxation, but not to us. When I said R&R and they said R&R, it was about rats and roaches. We had terrible battles with rats and roaches, because when you're sleeping on the floor and you don't have a heater, and your coats that you're wearing at that time are fur coats. We used to go out to stores and buy 5 fur coats for $5. True, it's true. 5 fur coats for $5. One of them is your bed, one of them is your blanket, and you had a couple of extras. The problem, of course, what you don't know is you don't know where those coats have been before you got them. You don't have any money to go get them cleaned. And later on, you would learn that rats love fur coats, and so do roaches. So one of the biggest problems we had, as I mentioned, was rats and roaches. And when we go on R&R, it meant be careful. When you go upstairs, you turn on the light, do not go into the room right away, because you'll get scared to death. You will have a moving wall. It'll be all brown, and then it'll turn white in about less than 8 seconds, because all the roaches go running away. And it's one of the important things about your morale when you return to your temple. You don't want to think that your temple is filled with just rats and roaches, so you got to kind of fake it. You got to put it yourself in the kind of consciousness in which you say, okay, I can adjust to this. If a roach is climbing up my legs, it's not the end of the world. If there's a rat running around at the bottom of my bed, I can handle that too. Because what we didn't know is animals can pick up your thoughts. You could actually scare one of these animals away with your thoughts, but we didn't know that kind of thing then. The sad part that I think most artists have is trying to deal with their families. Because to be an artist, you have to take one chance after another. You just cannot settle in with, this is a good way of doing it, and I'm going to keep on doing it, and I'm going to paint this way. And that's where I ran into the great difficulties. Because when you're in art school, they try to teach you to get some kind of a technique, some kind of way by which you can do things that you can repeat over and over again, creating many more series of paintings than just one or two, and that kind of thing. But the problem with that is, what about what is inside of you? You don't stay the same every month after month, year after year. Your opinions change all the time, and you need to adjust to that. So at one time, abstract expressionism might make it. Another time, realism might make it, or cubism might make it, or I finally decided symbolism does make, symbols make it. Now, this was a big problem in my life when I was younger, because I knew a lot about symbols, but I didn't know psychologists knew anything about symbols. I really thought I was bumping into something brand new. You know how it is when you first get involved with stuff. You think to yourself, oh, wow, I'm thinking these great ideas and nobody else has ever fat chance. I don't know if I've ever had an original thought, ever in my life. I'm always seem to be unconsciously borrowing things from others, and of course not trying to consciously steal them, but it just happens that way over a period of time. Well, symbols, when I got involved with symbols, that's when my problems began. Because when you take a look at what's going on in the outside world, and this is what most artists, unfortunately, when you get in that temple and you don't want to leave that temple, you can shut yourself off from everything that's going on in the outside world. And that can be really good for your creative juices, but it can be very bad for your understanding as to what's going on this planet. We are headed for some real serious problems. And I just don't mean floods and tornadoes and earthquakes. I mean, they all sound like they're serious problems, and they are. But we have uncontrollable weather. It's not just global warming. It's not just global cooling. We are moving into a situation in which since we have eliminated the ability to grow our foods in an organic state. Yes, we have organic food, but what we have not talked about or understood is that our soil has been totally depleted. And that means you have no nutrition in your food. It can be organic, but it doesn't mean it's going to be nutritious enough. Today you'd have to eat about 6 ears of corn for you to be on the same level of eating 1 ear of corn when my mom and dad were growing up in the 40s and the 50s. And we can thank agribusiness for that. So when I was looking at the outside world, and I thought to myself, are the artists ever going to wake up? Are they ever going to figure out that they are the last bastion of freedom? I kid you not. Artists can get away with saying things that other people cannot. And if they don't use that freedom, people get away with a lot of things. The murals that I've done, the cars that I painted, we'll take a look at them in just a little while, that they explain things that our media does not want to discuss, never has wanted to discuss. But if you see these truths to yourself and you want to get them out, it becomes extremely difficult to do that without being, well, if you can hide the truth and get it out there without being slugged over the head, that's a lot better than walking down the street and someone saying, hey, I just saw what you did over there, and so, I have my freedom to knock you in the head or whatever it is. That has happened to me plenty of times. But when you use symbols, you can say an awful lot before getting wiped out. It sounds kind of preposterous to most people, but it's true. When I've done murals at Johns Hopkins universities. I've had entire faculties and faculty wives come down on me. I've had attorney generals come in and saying, you're going to jail to spend the rest of your life in jail, kid, and that kind of thing. That it gets kind of scary, because I always thought we were free to speak what we thought. Well, you are, if you can do it in a way that it tells what you think is the truth, but other people at first don't catch on. They don't understand the total meaning of it. That's what symbols allowed me to do. It really saved me, because I could not take a look at or think about President Nixon at that time and think anything good at all. Everything that this man had done, especially with this country, as far as I was concerned, was not a good thing. It was mainly because of his ideas as to how government should be run. How should government be run? Well, if you would have watched carefully, the people that were dressing up behind him backstage, wearing pseudo-Nazi little uniforms and marching around like this is a military operation here at the White House, then you could understand why we could have an Alexander Haig or later on a George W. Bush and that kind of thing, because they moved in the same direction. So that's the reason why I used certain symbols. And that's what I'd like to do when we come back and take another look. Well, welcome back. Yes, indeed, we did deliver on what we said we were going to do. This is an actual Dr. Bob painting done in 2003, and it tells a story about what I had been thinking since 2000. And about 2000, 2001, especially after 9/11. This is how I saw the United States of America. Now, I don't want to shock you, but I'm going to give you a couple of insights into what I really believe. I believe we had a stolen election in the year 2000. I believe we had a second stolen election in the year 2004. The documentation in Ohio about the 2004 is there. It's unfortunate that all that happened in Ohio, because that's where all those little machines, the Diebold machines, etc., and the control of them with the Republican Party, isn't that nice? We weren't told that the Republican Party had great control over those machines, so that when they did countings, they could throw in a couple of thousand votes here and there. And indeed, that's the kind of thing that was going on. The media knew about it, didn't say a word about it. So just because the media knows about it doesn't mean they're going to tell us about it. And I think it has a lot to do with what we find in the American flag. Now, this American flag contains in its element here the symbol of the skull and bones. The skull and bones with the number 322 tells you about a secret society that some of the wealthiest individuals in the United States of America and the planet were members of. And most importantly, 3 Bush family members were members of this secret society. Preston Bush, the granddaddy, George H.W. Bush, the second one, and the third one was George W. Bush. All 3 were members of this secret society. This particular secret society, their main interest was getting their people in all kinds of political, banking situations so that they could literally control what this country was about. And if, indeed, not just this country, but the rest of the planet. That's basically what that whole secret society is about. And who was their representative? Some of their representatives, most people are not aware of who used to own, run, and control this organization that we call Monsanto. One of the most exciting things that Sir Paul McCartney, Beatle number 1, 2, 3, or 4, did for the rest of the planet is not known to most people on this planet. It was Sir Paul McCartney, Sir George Martin, and a group of other musicians started a movement against genetically modified foods in the United Kingdom and Europe. Now, why did they come up against genetically modified foods back in those days? Well, a recent headline right here tells you. Monsanto, GMO, genetically modified corn linked to organ failures. That's serious trouble. When are we going to hear about that? Well, they've known about this in the United Kingdom and Europe for many, many years. This is 2010. That's what this story is now. We are something like 8-10 years behind what they actually understood in Europe and the United Kingdom. When the British understood what this situation was, 83% of the British voted out genetically modified foods. Literally. I mean, this is extremely important. They said, and the same thing happened in Europe. So what did genetically modified foods do? That is Monsanto, who is responsible for that. And who is Monsanto? Well, would you be surprised to know that there were many individuals in the Bush administration involved with Monsanto, like Dick Cheney. You ever heard of Dick Cheney, the Vice President of the United States? Or what about the Secretary of the Defense? Secretary of Defense. It's Donald Rumsfeld, or Rumsfeld, as some people would like to call him. They're playing around with that because of the fields that he's running through. Got that little joke there. Well, Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, these are two of the most important people in the last W administration, which I must say, after 8 years of W, we literally lost control of this country. As a matter of fact, I don't think many people would disagree with this, but what we saw happen in corporate America, which is something that had been happening all along, except finally it unraveled and came out into the open. That could have gone on forever and ever, as far as I'm concerned, because when the banks want to do what they want to do, and politicians are certainly going to want to do what they want to do, what do they want to do? They want to establish what is called a new world order. Not the new world order that we find on the bottom of the dollar bill or the back of the dollar bill, Novus Ordo Seclorum, because that is not the new world order. That's the new order of the ages, and we'll get to the Great Seal and the Pyramidion Triangle later on. But I did this piece in 2002, 2003. This is called Monsanto. And in the red stripes of the American flag, because Monsanto literally has taken over our agribusiness in the United States. You see Monsanto, Frankenfood, terminates, or Terminator genes, persecutes farmers. We genuinely mean persecutes farmers. If farmers came out against genetically modified foods and don't use them, what Monsanto wanted to do was to prefer charges against the farmer, so that the farmer was no longer free to choose what kind of seeds that they were using. Well, that's a serious problem. And the unfortunate thing is, I thought it would be important to connect it to the secret society that we have over here, Skull and Bones, because this is the Bushes. This is W, this is his dad, this is Prescott Bush. And you know anything about Prescott Bush? You should know that during World War II, Prescott Bush was supporting Nazis. He was supporting Hitler. When the United States government found out that Prescott Bush was supporting Hitler, they took his bank away. That is an extraordinary thing to do to the Bush family. When we had these previous elections in 2000 and 2004, was that ever brought up? That there actually were Nazi supporters within the Bush family? Later on, when you take a look at what happened in our torturing, then you understand that, yeah, that's the same kind of tactics that the Nazis used against anybody else in this country. And we learned it from Nazis, because Nazis came into America through what was called blowback. And that is, after World War II, the Russians and Americans ran over there, grabbed as many German scientists as they could, dragged them back to the United States and Russia, and told them, how about working on our science projects here, like going to the moon and such. And what about that? And literally what we have there is the foundation within NASA of a group of individuals who were indeed Nazis, who were involved with death camps and that kind of thing. When you kind of bring that kind of philosophy into the United States, what you're doing is you're setting up a group of individuals that will support the kind of things that the Bush administration supported. And they, unfortunately, have what is literally controlled not just America for the past 8 years, but their intention is to continue to do so under all different methods. And I'm seriously talking about tyranny from that standpoint. So this flag has within it some white stripes. Our stripes aren't white anymore here. You notice that? It's not like we didn't have a good detergent or anything like that, but we got things within our white stripes that are literally allowing Monsanto to do that. This kind of thing, control our agribusiness, control our food supply and the quality of our food. Who are they? Well, it's very simple. CNN, ABC, CBS, Exxon, and National Arts Council. No, that's actually not. That's not NBC. Sorry, Fox, CIA, etc., etc. You will find in every one of these stripes the repetition of corporate structures. Corporate structures are enormously important because, as you probably know, our Supreme Court judges believe that corporations are just as important as human beings. They should have a vote. Well, it's a good thing that 83% of Americans are against that. I don't know what else we could do to stop them if most Americans were, and even politicians are against it because they can see what the corporations have done over since 2000 to 2008 through the Bush years. They literally ran rampant over everything. Didn't make any difference, especially in regards to our agricultural business and our ecological or environmental concerns, which is another huge problem that we have here. So this piece of work, Monsanto, is telling us that our country has become dominated by corporate structures who are more important than you or I or anybody else's vote except the corporate vote. It's a very unpopular piece. Nobody's going to want to have this in their home. Nobody is going to want to look at this. But I had to do it because if I hadn't, I probably would have gone a little bit crazier than normal, because there's different levels of different craziness, as we all well know. What I'd like to do now is to lift our consciousness out of the muck of what we have found in the last 8 years and into a solution that I have found through symbols, because this tells the story through symbols. Though many people would not be offended by this if they couldn't read these symbols. They would just say, hey, you got a dirty flag with a skull up there, not knowing that I'm pointing exactly to the beings, the organization that is responsible for this kind of demise. Will you read about this in the newspapers? No. Will you see this on corporate television? No. Why won't you? Mainly because every company that is involved in the media needs to make money. They're not going to be talking about the worst polluter on the planet, General Electric, because they'd like to have General Electric be sponsors of their television shows. They just don't do that kind of thing. Even with that wonderful documentary that won several Academy Awards, that's basically relating what General Electric means to the rest of the planet, not just the United States of America. When we find out that you can take symbols to make this statement and almost get away with it, there are ways to bring 3 different religions together and show it in symbols in such a way that, in my opinion, tells the same story, that we are one people on one planet. And when we come back next time, we're going to take a look at this particular piece called the Perennial Philosophy, which tells the story as to how the Jewish tradition, the Christian tradition, and the Muslim tradition, through their own symbols, can become united. One people on one planet.